Institute. Thank you all so much for joining us today to hear from Mr. Staffan De Mistura, the UN Special Representative for Afghanistan. It's a real honor to have him here today and to have him here in Washington. He's not often here in D.C. and, in fact, has just come down recently from New York City, where he was talking about Afghanistan on the eve of the UN's decision to renew the mandate in Afghanistan. And I believe the Security Council is voting today. Is that correct?
Done.
It is done, and it has passed.
Yeah.
So on Thursday, Mr. De Mistura was talking about the UN's role in Afghanistan and its commitment to the development and the security of the country. The UN plays a very important role there. There are 34, the UN is represented in 34 Afghan provinces, and spent last year over $1 billion on the country. Millions of Afghans benefit from UN support for food programs, health services, and, of course, infrastructure development. But Afghans are asking today to take a greater lead in all aspects of governance and development and efforts to achieve peace. And Mr. De Mistura made it very clear in his speech at the UN on Thursday that the UN takes these calls for sovereignty very seriously. It hears them and takes them seriously. But how should this transition take place? What are the challenges of handing over greater responsibility to the Afghan government and government agencies? And how can the UN support this process as well as maintain its commitment to Afghanistan's development? Well, these are some of the questions that will be at the heart of what Mr. De Mistura will be discussing with us today. I'm going to keep his bio brief because it's in the flyer that we've handed out to everyone, but he is one of the UN's most accomplished and experienced officials, having served in the organization for over 30 years. 40 years. Well, even more reason to take everything he says very seriously. Under challenging conditions, he has promoted political dialogue, led reconstruction and development and humanitarian assistance efforts, and been involved in overseeing elections throughout the world. His work has taken him from Somalia to the Middle East, to the Balkans, to Nepal, to Afghanistan, and to many places in between. Before taking up his current position in Kabul, Mr. De Mistura served as the Deputy Executive Director at the World Food Program in Rome. Prior to that, he served in Iraq as the Secretary General's Special Representative. Under his leadership, his team of some 1,000 people helped oversee successful elections in Iraq, as well as reconstruction, development, and humanitarian assistance. And those are just a few of his many accomplishments. So once again, it's a great honor to have you here, Mr. De Mistura. I'd like to invite you to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hi. And thank you. Good to see many friends and colleagues here. Let me perhaps keep it short so that you will have opportunities of raising questions. And then focus instead on 3 areas and then on 3 events, just to have some logic, because there's so much we could be talking about in Afghanistan. So the 3 areas is, first of all, security, because that's the first priority for everyone in Afghanistan, every Afghan and every foreign Afghanistan. And the second priority, as you probably know, is security as well. Then the second issue is what do we mean and what can we do and what does it mean transition. And the other key word is reintegration, and the next word is reconciliation. So you're having the words which mean a lot and should be meaning even more, hopefully, during this year. And then in terms of events, we have the announcement by the President, which took place yesterday. And then we have the Istanbul conference. Prior to that, there will be an announcement by President Obama, and as he has indicated, sometime in July. And then there will be a conference in Bonn. These are the stepping stones which can be foreseen. Of course, as we are in a very fluid environment, and when we are not the only ones having stepping stones or creating stepping stones, others may have others, and we hope not. But that is the plan. Okay. So let's go back on security, because it's the issue. The situation in terms of security, as we can see it, because there is always a lot of debate about is it now more secure, less secure than before, are we getting in a worse situation, and so on. The fact is that the surge by General Petraeus, and is a non-military who speaks, is working. We can see that happening in the sense that there is clearly a change in the perception in Afghanistan of the momentum. Now, you could say, and rightly so, yeah, but how come, if it is working, there are so many casualties and there is so much violence? This is, unfortunately, a reality which we saw also in Iraq. There was a moment when the peak of the so-called pressure did attract a counter-peak by the insurgents. And secondly, there was also much more occasions because there were many more boots on the ground. The issue is to see whether after 6 months this is producing what it should be producing. And here comes the main point. In Iraq, although every country is different, in Iraq after a period of peak of bad news, but linked to actually a surge, you suddenly started seeing the first beginning of the outcome of the surge. In Afghanistan, we will have to see what's happening in July. Because obviously the outcome of a military intensified operation cannot be how many people on the other side you are killing, more than last year or more than last month, but whether that has produced what I think in a remarkably well worded, every word in my modest opinion was highly calculated, speech by the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton at the Asian Society, could have been at the Middle East Society next time, was indicating, in other words, from a military surge, there is a need for a diplomatic political surge. And that needs to be seen taking place during this year. Otherwise, that military aspect alone cannot be an indicator of any success, because, or sustainable success, because we all have agreed, everyone, and in my opinion, even the Taliban have agreed with themselves, there is no military victory in Afghanistan. So let's move to the next point. We can elaborate, of course, on many others, but on regarding security. Transition. What is transition? Transition is, yes, a key word which sends a message, but is also a reality, and coincides with a win-win situation, paradoxically. Paradoxically, we will see whether it does in concrete, but we have to be optimists. What is the win-win? Well, let's give you some elements that we live every day with. President Karzai is clearly, and the Afghans are clearly, emphatic about their own national sovereignty. We Afghans have been in charge of our country for 4,000 years. The Russians went through, Alexander the Great, the Brits. Foreigners now are helping us, but at the end of the day, we are profoundly nationalistic. Well, very true. In that case, it's time for them to start feeling that this is actually moving in the direction of them owning more their future. So, one win. Of course, that comes with accountability. It comes also with responsibility, and therefore it's a challenge.